What if the Avengers Endgame we all cried, cheered, and obsessed over was almost a completely different film? What if the portals we screamed at in theaters, the "I am Iron Man" line that became etched into cinematic history, and even the fates of Earth's mightiest heroes weren't meant to happen the way we know them? Deep inside Marvel Studios, before cameras rolled and before actors suited up one final time, there existed another plan. A plan so daring and so devastating that it could have changed the way we remember the Marvel Cinematic Universe forever. This isn't just fan speculation. This was the original blueprint for Avengers Endgame. The story that reached theaters was the result of careful choices, and the road not taken reveals a much darker, more final farewell. To understand these choices, we have to ask a guiding question: what does it mean to truly end a story? Endgame wasn't just a movie, it was a farewell letter, a cultural milestone, a shared goodbye to heroes we had grown up with for over a decade. Endings carry a weight because they need to feel complete. Marvel had a version of Endgame that could have been the most tragic, definitive, and bittersweet ending in superhero movie history, but they didn't use it. The reasons why tell us as much about the power of storytelling as they do about the MCU itself. So, let's begin with the ending that almost was. Imagine this, Avengers. Endgame concludes with every single one of the original 6 Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye, laying down their lives together. This was the original concept, a Toy Story 3 style ending where the first family of Marvel went out completely united. Each member would give everything so the universe could survive. No one would retire. No one would go back in time to dance. No one would watch the sunrise on a farm. They would all go down together. It would have been final, poetic, and heartbreaking beyond measure. Just pause and think of how that would have felt. Not one funeral, but 6. Not one goodbye, but 6. The MCU would have closed the book on its founding generation in a single stroke. There would be no Captain America handing his shield to Sam Wilson, no Bruce Banner evolving into Smart Hulk, no Thor finding new meaning with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and no chance for Clint Barton to live the life Natasha Romanoff wanted him to have. Everything would have ended right there. This wasn't just an idea scribbled on a whiteboard. Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, himself initially pitched this version. The thinking was simple. The MCU had thrived because of these 6 characters, so their story should end together. They should leave as they came in, united. It's a pitch that feels almost Shakespearean in its tragedy. Yet directors Anthony and Joe Russo looked at this plan and decided it was too much. It was too extreme and too devastating for audiences to process. Marvel wasn't just ending a movie, they were ending an era. And sometimes, closure doesn't have to mean obliteration. But the drastic changes didn't stop with who lived and who died. Many of the story beats we think of as untouchable in Endgame weren't even in the earliest drafts. The famous portal scene, the one that had theaters erupting in applause across the world, did not exist. In the original plan, there was no return of the armies, no Avengers Assemble moment. That singular cinematic moment of catharsis was not part of the film's original DNA. Perhaps even more shocking, Nick Fury, the man who started it all by recruiting Tony Stark in a post-credits scene back in 2008, was supposed to die. His story would have ended not in the shadows of secrecy, but with the ultimate sacrifice. Think of the symbolism, Fury bringing the Avengers together, and his death being the glue that pushed them one last time into battle. But again, the filmmakers decided to move away from that direction. While it might have been narratively satisfying, it risked overloading an already emotional farewell with too many deaths. Then there's the time heist, the playful, nostalgic revisiting of earlier Marvel movies that gave us callbacks and time travel fun. In the original plan, the heroes weren't going back to New York in 2012. That iconic shot of the camera circling around the Avengers as we cut back to the first Avengers film wasn't going to happen. Instead, the time heist was narrower, less celebratory, and less of a victory lap for the MCU. Without it, the movie would have been darker and tighter, but it would have missed some of that emotional nostalgia that made audiences cry with both sadness and joy. The surprises continue. Thor, instead of battling Thanos in the final confrontation, was initially supposed to face a younger version of himself. Imagine the Thor we met in the early days. Brash, arrogant, and reckless, clashing with the broken, beer-bellied Thor of Endgame. It would have been a mirror match, a literal confrontation with his own growth and failures. Story-wise, it's brilliant. Visually, it could have been electrifying. But the Russos pivoted, perhaps realizing that while clever, it risked distracting from the larger stakes. Endgame wasn't the story of Thor finding himself, it was the story of everyone uniting to undo the snap. A deeper theme emerges from all these discarded ideas. The original plan for Endgame seemed obsessed with finality, with giving audiences the heaviest, darkest goodbye possible. Every Avenger dead, Fury gone, Thor fighting himself, and a universe not won through portals and hope, but through painful sacrifice after painful sacrifice. It was raw, brutal tragedy in superhero clothing. Yet storytelling isn't just about endings, it's about resonance. The Russo brothers understood that audiences needed not only to mourn, but also to celebrate. Endgame had to feel like a goodbye, but also like a thank you. It had to make us cry, but also make us cheer. This is why the movie evolved into what we got. Think of the "I am Iron Man" moment. That line wasn't even in the script until after Robert Downey Jr. had already said his goodbyes. He had filmed his final scenes, the crew had hugged him and cried with him, and he had been sent off. Then someone realized the story needed one more beat, one more echo from the beginning. They brought him back to a location near where he had first auditioned and gave him the line that started it all. It was a goodbye that wasn't just tragic, but poetic. That's the difference between an ending that devastates and an ending that endures. The original Endgame was about Marvel testing the limits of its own mythology. Could they really end the Infinity Saga with the total annihilation of their founding heroes? Would audiences accept it, or would they revolt? Think about Toy Story 3. In its final act, the toys hold hands, ready to die together. For a moment, it looks like that's it. When they are saved, it feels miraculous. Marvel almost tried the same thing, except without the miracle. A final curtain drop with no strings pulled at the last second. Had Marvel gone that route, we would be living in a completely different cinematic landscape today. There would be no Captain America handing down the shield, no Thor, Love and Thunder, no Hawkeye TV series exploring his mentorship of Kate Bishop. The MCU as a continuing universe might have effectively ended in 2019. How do you continue when you've buried all your icons? It would have been definitive in a way that Marvel movies rarely are. Instead, Marvel chose continuity, legacy, and renewal. They left threads open, stories to tell, and heroes to inspire a new generation. That decision is why the MCU is still alive today. The shadow of the original plan gave the final film its depth. When we look back at Avengers Endgame, the real genius isn't just in what we saw, but in what we didn't. The choices not taken, the sacrifices not made, and the tragedies avoided. The beauty of examining these discarded plans isn't just about indulging in trivia. It's about seeing the fragile architecture of storytelling, how one shift in a scene or a single altered line can ripple across an entire saga. The Marvel team essentially built two very different endings to the Infinity Saga, one where finality ruled all, and another where legacy triumphed. In that tension, we can uncover fascinating truths about both the MCU and the art of storytelling itself. Let's look more closely at some of these altered ideas, starting with the fight between Thor and his younger self. Think of the symbolism. Thor in Endgame is a man consumed by failure. He blames himself for not stopping Thanos when he had the chance. He has buried his guilt under food, alcohol, and detachment. Now imagine placing him face to face with the brash, cocky god we first met in Phase 1. It wouldn't just be a battle of hammers and lightning, it would be a battle of identities. Who is the true Thor? The arrogant boy who had to be humbled, or the broken man who needs to find strength again? That fight would have been Thor's therapy. Instead of the heart-to-heart moments with his mother Frigga that we got in the theatrical cut, Thor would have found his redemption by literally defeating the worst version of himself. On paper, that sounds brilliant. But when you look at the MCU as a whole, it feels almost too self-contained. The strength of Endgame lies in how it's not just one hero's story, it's everyone's story converging. A mirror match for Thor might have been fascinating, but it also might have pulled too much focus away from the ensemble. This is a theme you'll notice across all these discarded storylines. Marvel consistently chose the collective over the individual. The writers and directors trimmed away storylines that would have elevated one character's arc, but potentially weakened the sense of unity. Doctor Strange, for instance, was originally set to have a rematch with Thanos. Considering how visually spectacular their duel was in Infinity War, you can imagine how epic a round 2 could have been. A battle of sorcery versus sheer power, strategy against brute force. But that too was scrapped because the finale wasn't about one hero taking the spotlight, it was about everyone standing shoulder to shoulder. This is where the brilliance of the final version shines. Instead of splitting off into duels that spotlighted individuals, the movie built toward one massive unifying crescendo, portals opening, allies returning, and every character standing together on the same battlefield. It wasn't just the Avengers, it was Wakanda, Asgard, Titan, and Earth united. The portal scene is a visual manifesto. The MCU had never been about one person, it was about a community of heroes. But here's the paradox, the absence of that scene in the original plans shows us that sometimes the best moments in cinema history almost don't exist. It's not that Marvel always knew they were building toward that cheer-inducing moment, it's that they had to experiment, test, and reimagine until they realized what the audience needed most. This lesson applies beyond Marvel. It shows us that even the greatest stories aren't born perfect. They're sculpted, rewritten, and sometimes saved at the last minute by a single idea. Take I Am Iron Man. In the original ending, Tony Snap didn't include that line, he just silently sacrificed himself. Imagine how different that feels. Still powerful and heroic, but less poetic, less circular. The line ties his arc together, from a selfish billionaire declaring his identity in 2008, to a selfless hero declaring it again in 2019 as his final words. Without that echo, Tony's death feels like an ending. With it, his death feels like destiny. The fact that this line was added late after Robert Downey Jr. had already filmed his farewell shows the delicate balance between tragedy and hope, silence and resonance. The darker Endgame would have doubled down on tragedy. Every hero dead, portals absent, Nick Fury gone. A Toy Story 3 ending without the claw machine miracle. It would have been bold, but boldness doesn't always equal brilliance. Sometimes what audiences need most isn't the harshest ending, but the truest one. The truth of Endgame lies not in wiping the slate clean, but in passing the torch. Consider Steve Rogers. Under the original plan, Steve likely would have died alongside the others. A battlefield death, noble and final. Yet, the ending we got, Steve traveling back to return the stones and staying in the past to dance with Peggy, isn't just closure for him, it's a subversion. Steve, the soldier who always put duty before himself, finally chooses a selfish act, a life, a home, a dance. That choice means just as much as any sacrifice because it tells us that even heroes deserve peace. If Marvel had killed Steve, his arc would have ended with the same note it had carried all along: duty, sacrifice, and selflessness. By letting him live, Marvel gave us something more nuanced, the idea that a hero's greatest reward isn't glory, but rest. Then there's Natasha. Her death was already devastating, but imagine an Endgame where everyone died. In that context, her sacrifice might have been overshadowed. In the version we got, her choice stands alone, giving her the dignity of being the first original Avenger to lay down her life for the team. It also gave space for Hawkeye to live on, to carry her memory, and eventually pass his bow to Kate Bishop. Again, legacy over finality. Let's return to Fury. His death was in those early drafts for a reason. Symbolically, it makes sense. He's the architect of the Avengers initiative. His death in Endgame would have closed the loop. He started the Avengers, and he ends with them. But the Russos resisted, and their reasoning reveals something deeper. Marvel didn't want the Infinity Saga to feel like a full stop. They wanted it to feel like a semicolon, a pause before continuation. By sparing Fury, they preserved the sense that the world would keep spinning, the Avengers would keep evolving, and the MCU would keep growing. This decision is deeply tied to audience psychology. Imagine being a fan who followed these movies for 11 years. You laughed, cried, and grew up alongside these characters. Then, suddenly, in one film, every founding Avenger dies, Fury dies, and everyone is gone. The movie ends at a mass funeral. Yes, it's bold and final, but how do you walk out of the theater after that? Do you feel uplifted? Do you want to return to the MCU for the next chapter? Or do you feel emotionally broken, as if you've lost a family? That's the key question. Endgame wasn't just about ending, it was about inviting us to continue. Marvel understood that for fans to follow into Phase 4 and beyond, they needed hope. they needed seeds of tomorrow. Choices like keeping Fury alive, letting Steve retire, allowing Thor to find new purpose with the Guardians, and passing Clint's legacy to Kate mattered. They gave us something to hold on to. In the bigger picture of storytelling, endings are always the hardest part of any narrative because they define how we remember the whole. A bad ending can sour an otherwise great story, while a perfect ending can elevate everything that came before. The MCU had to end in a way that honored its characters, satisfied fans, and left the door open for future stories. That's a nearly impossible balancing act. These alternate drafts show us the roads not taken, the endings that might have burned brightly but left ashes instead of light. It's like standing at a crossroads. One path is tragedy, all 6 Avengers dead, portals absent, the saga ending in fire. The other path is bittersweet hope. Tony and Natasha gone, but others moving forward, passing the torch, living to tell the tale. Marvel chose the latter. In doing so, they gave us not just an ending, but a promise that the MCU would continue to evolve, that new heroes would rise, and that the spirit of the originals would endure. Marvel also had to think of the cultural impact. Endgame wasn't just a movie, it was an event, a worldwide shared experience. Millions of fans packed into theaters, cheering, sobbing, and gasping. It wasn't just about the story, it was about the memory. If Marvel had chosen the Toy Story 3 ending without the rescue, the memory we'd carry might have been grief, bitterness, and even anger. By choosing a bittersweet ending instead, Marvel gave us catharsis. We cried, but we also cheered. That balance is what makes Endgame rewatchable and what makes its legacy endure. When we look back at the original plans, the darker paths, the duels that never happened, the deaths that were spared, what we're really seeing is the art of restraint. Storytelling isn't just about what you show, it's about what you choose not to show. The original Endgame would have been legendary in its tragedy, but the Endgame we got is legendary in its humanity, and that perhaps is the more powerful choice.